Jake Mitchell stood at the edge of the massive hall and tried not to look nervous. The building was bigger than anything he had ever seen on Earth. Crystal walls stretched up so high he could barely see the ceiling. Strange lights floated in the air without any wires holding them. Aliens of every shape and size filled the room, talking in languages that hurt his ears. He was 28 years old and a pilot in Earth's military. 2 months ago, he was flying missions above his home planet. Now he stood on Zalera Prime, representing humanity at the Galactic Council Summit. It felt like a dream, a very strange, very real dream. Ambassador Lisa Crawford stood beside him. She was 53 and had been a diplomat for 30 years. Even she looked overwhelmed. She leaned close and whispered in his ear, "Remember, we are observers only. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't touch anything. And for God's sake, don't start an intergalactic incident." Jake nodded. He understood. Earth had only discovered faster than light travel 2 years ago. Compared to the other species here, humans were babies. Most of the aliens looked at them like annoying insects. A group of tall, blue-skinned aliens walked past. They wore armor that seemed to glow with its own light. One of them looked at Jake and said something that made the others laugh. Jake didn't need a translation to know they were making fun of him. The opening ceremony began. A hologram appeared in the center of the hall showing the leader of the Galactic Council. The alien looked like a cross between an octopus and a tree. It spoke in a voice that the translation device in Jake's ear turned into English. "Welcome to the 300th Galactic Summit. We gather to discuss peace, trade, and the future of our galaxy." Jake tried to pay attention, but his eyes kept wandering around the room. That's when he saw her. She stood on a balcony above the main floor surrounded by guards. She was tall, maybe 7 feet, with skin that looked like it was made of silver and gold mixed together. Her eyes were a bright purple that seemed to glow. She wore armor that looked both beautiful and deadly. Long white hair fell down her back like a waterfall. "Who is that?" Jake whispered to Ambassador Crawford. Crawford followed his gaze and her face went pale. "That's Princess Zarakai of the Velnari Empire, one of the most powerful families in the galaxy. Don't even look at her too long. Her people are warriors and they don't like outsiders." Jake looked away quickly, but something made him glance back. For just a second, the princess was looking directly at him. Their eyes met. Then she turned away. After the ceremony, there was a demonstration of military technology. Different species showed off their weapons and defense systems. It was meant to be safe just for show. Everything was supposed to be turned off or set to low power. Jake and Crawford stood in the exhibition hall with hundreds of other delegates. A weapons platform floated in the center of the room. It was from the Korthax species, a race of insect-like warriors. The platform was demonstrating its targeting system. Then something went wrong. The weapon started making a high-pitched sound. The lights on its surface turned from blue to red. The Korthax operator started pressing buttons frantically, but nothing happened. "Malfunction!" someone screamed. "Get back!" The crowd panicked. Aliens of all shapes and sizes ran for the exits, pushing and shoving. The weapon started spinning, its barrels pointing in random directions. Jake saw immediately what was about to happen. The weapon was going to fire and people were going to die. His military training kicked in. While everyone else ran away, Jake ran toward the danger. He saw Princess Zarakai standing with her guards about 30 feet from the weapon. They were trying to move her to safety, but the crowd was too thick. The weapon's barrel was pointing right at them. It was about to fire. Jake didn't think. He just moved. He jumped over a fallen bench and slid under a floating platform. He reached the weapon just as it started to glow bright red. He grabbed a cable hanging from its side and yanked it hard. The cable sparked and smoked. The weapon made a terrible grinding sound. It wasn't enough. The weapon was still charging. Jake looked around desperately. He saw a control panel on the side. He punched it with his fist. Pain shot through his hand, but the panel cracked open. Inside was a massive alien technology he didn't understand. He had maybe 5 seconds before the weapon fired. He grabbed wires at random and pulled. Sparks flew. Something shocked him and he felt his arm go numb. But he kept pulling. The weapon made one last high-pitched sound, then went silent. The red lights faded to black. Smoke poured from the control panel. Jake fell backward, breathing hard. The exhibition hall was silent. Hundreds of aliens stared at him. Jake slowly got to his feet. His hand was bleeding and his arm still felt numb, but he was alive. More importantly, everyone else was alive too. He heard footsteps behind him. He turned and found himself face to face with Princess Zarakai. Up close, she was even more impressive. She was a full foot taller than him. Her armor was covered in symbols he couldn't read. Her purple eyes studied him with an intensity that made him feel like she could see into his soul. "You saved my life," she said. Her voice was deep and musical. The translation device made it sound like she was speaking English, but he could hear the alien tones underneath. "I just did what anyone would do," Jake said. "No," she said firmly. "You did what no one else did. While others fled, you ran toward danger. You risked your life for strangers. For me." She was still staring at him. Jake felt his face getting hot. He didn't know what to say. Then Princess Zarakai did something that would change both of their lives forever. She turned to her guards and the other Velnari who had gathered around. She spoke in her own language, words that sounded like music and thunder mixed together. The Velnari gasped. Some of them looked shocked. Others looked angry. One of the guards, a male warrior even bigger than the princess, stepped forward and started arguing with her. "What did she say?" Jake asked. His translation device had failed to pick up her words. Ambassador Crawford appeared at his side. Her face was white as snow. Her hands were shaking. "Jake," she whispered, "we need to leave."
"Right now. Why?"
"What did she say?" Crawford grabbed his arm and tried to pull him away. But Princess Zarakai stepped in front of them. She looked down at Jake and smiled. It was a smile that promised everything and terrified him at the same time. "I will translate for you," the princess said in English. "I said that you are my mate, my destined partner, and I claim you before all witnesses." The hall erupted in chaos. Aliens started shouting in dozens of languages. Cameras appeared from nowhere, floating in the air to record everything. Jake stood frozen, unable to process what he had just heard. Ambassador Crawford looked like she might faint. "This is bad," she muttered. "This is very, very bad." But as Jake looked into Princess Zarakai's glowing purple eyes, he felt something he couldn't explain. Something that felt like recognition, like coming home. And somewhere deep inside, he knew his life would never be the same again. The next morning, Jake woke up in his room at the diplomatic quarters still trying to believe yesterday had actually happened. A princess from one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy had declared him her mate, in front of thousands of witnesses. The video was already spreading across 100 worlds. His communication device had been buzzing all night with messages from Earth. The president wanted to talk to him. The Secretary of Defense wanted to talk to him. His mother wanted to know if he was eating properly and if the alien princess was nice. Ambassador Crawford came to his room early. She looked like she hadn't slept at all. "We have a problem," she said. "Actually, we have about 50 problems, but let's start with the big one." She pulled up a hologram display. It showed Princess Zarakai standing with a group of official-looking Velnari. The Velnari have formal mating traditions. When a royal declares their mate, that person must complete 3 trials to prove they are worthy: combat, strategy, and spirit. If you refuse or fail, it brings shame to both of you. Jake sat down heavily on his bed. "What happens if I refuse?" Princess Zarakai would be humiliated. Her people would lose respect for her. It could even cost her the throne someday, and Earth would lose any chance of an alliance with the Velnari Empire. "So I don't really have a choice." Crawford sighed. "You always have a choice, Jake. But every choice has consequences." Before he could respond, there was a knock on his door. When he opened it, he found a Velnari warrior standing there. It was the same male who had argued with Princess Zarakai yesterday. "I am Commander Tiran," the warrior said. His voice was deep and hard. "The princess requests your presence." Jake followed the commander through the diplomatic complex. Other aliens stared as they passed. Some looked curious. Others looked angry. Jake heard whispers and knew they were talking about him. Commander Tiran led him to a private garden. Real plants grew here, brought from 100 different worlds. The smell was amazing and strange at the same time. Princess Zarakai stood by a fountain. She wasn't wearing her armor today. Instead, she wore a flowing dress that changed colors in the light. She looked almost human except for her height and her glowing purple eyes. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Did I have a choice?" Jake asked. She smiled slightly. "You always have a choice. But I hoped you would choose to come." Commander Tiran left them alone. Jake and the princess stood looking at each other for a long moment. "Why me?" Jake finally asked. You could have anyone. Why choose a human you just met? Zarakai walked closer to him. Even in the dress, she moved like a warrior, graceful and dangerous. My people believe that we know our destined mate when we meet them. It is a combination of things. The way you smell, the way you move, something deeper that cannot be explained. When I saw you run toward danger while others fled, when I looked into your eyes, I knew. That's crazy, Jake said. But even as he said it, he remembered the feeling he had when their eyes met. That sense of recognition. Perhaps, Zarakai said. But crazy or not, I have made my choice. Now you must make yours. Will you face the trials? Jake thought about everything at stake. Earth needed allies. The Velnari Empire was powerful and respected. But more than that, when he looked at Zarakai, he felt something he had never felt before. Fear, yes, but also excitement and curiosity and something that might be the beginning of love. Tell me about the trials, he said. Zarakai's face lit up with joy. She sat down on a bench and gestured for Jake to join her. The first trial is combat. You will face 3 of our warriors in the arena. You must win or at least prove your courage. The second trial is strategy. You will command forces in a simulation against impossible odds. The third trial is spirit. You will enter our sacred temple and face challenges of the mind and soul. And these trials were designed for your people, not humans. Yes, she admitted. No alien has ever attempted them. You will be the first. Great. No pressure then, she laughed. It was a beautiful sound. I will help you prepare. We have 5 days before the first trial. For the next 5 days, Jake trained harder than he had ever trained in his life. Every morning, Zarakai taught him Velnari combat techniques. The Velnari were stronger and faster than humans, so he had to learn to use speed and strategy instead of power. In the afternoons, they talked. Zarakai told him about her world, about growing up as a princess, about the pressure to be perfect. Jake told her about Earth, about his family, about becoming a pilot and seeing his planet from space for the first time. My people value strength above all, Zarakai said one evening. But sometimes I think we confuse strength with hardness. We don't allow ourselves to show emotion or weakness. Humans are different, Jake said. We cry and laugh and get scared, but that doesn't make us weak. Sometimes feeling things deeply makes us stronger. Zarakai looked at him with wonder. This is why you are special. You show me a different way of being strong. As they spent more time together, Jake realized he was falling in love with her. It wasn't just her beauty or her strength. It was her intelligence, her curiosity, the way she listened when he talked, the way she saw value in things her people dismissed. But not everyone was happy about their connection. Duke Kael'thor was a high-ranking Velnari noble who had wanted to marry Zarakai for years. He was powerful, rich, and mean. When he heard about Jake, he was furious. A human? He shouted in the council chambers. A primitive from a backwards world? This is an insult to our entire empire. He began working behind the scenes to make sure Jake would fail the trials. He bribed officials and spread rumors that Jake was using Earth technology to cheat. He even tried to change the rules to make the trials more dangerous. Finally, the day of the first trial arrived. The arena was enormous, big enough to hold 50,000 spectators. Every seat was filled. Aliens from across the galaxy had come to watch the human try to prove himself worthy of a Velnari princess. Jake stood in the center of the arena wearing simple fighting clothes. He had no armor and no weapons except a ceremonial staff. Across from him stood his first opponent, a Velnari warrior who was 8 feet tall and covered in muscle. The crowd roared. Jake's heart pounded in his chest. He looked up at the royal box where Zarakai sat. She was watching him with complete faith in her eyes. The signal sounded. The fight began. The first warrior came at Jake like a freight train. Jake barely dodged the first strike. The staff whistled past his head close enough to feel the wind. He tried to counter, but the warrior was too fast. A blow caught him in the ribs and sent him flying. Jake got up slowly. His side screamed with pain. He could taste blood in his mouth. The crowd was laughing. They thought he was finished already, but Jake Mitchell didn't give up. He never had and he never would. He stood up straight, adjusted his grip on the staff, and smiled. The warrior looked confused. Why was the human smiling? Because Jake had learned something important in the first exchange. The warrior was strong and fast, but he followed patterns. He attacked the same way every time. And patterns could be beaten. The second round began. This time Jake was ready. He used everything Zarakai had taught him combined with his own training. He moved unpredictably, attacked from angles the warrior didn't expect. He couldn't match the Velnari's strength, but he could outsmart him. The fight went back and forth. Jake took more hits, but he landed some of his own. The crowd stopped laughing. They leaned forward in their seats. This human was actually fighting back. In the third round against the third warrior, Jake pulled off something amazing. He used a move that combined human martial arts with Velnari technique. The warrior never saw it coming. Jake's staff connected with the warrior's legs, sweeping them out from under him. The huge alien crashed to the ground. The arena went silent. Then it erupted in cheers. Jake had done it. He had passed the first trial. He looked up at Zarakai. She was standing, her fist raised in victory. The joy on her face made every bruise and cut worth it. But in the shadows, Duke Kael'thor watched with cold eyes. The human had passed one trial, but there were 2 more to go, and the Duke would make sure they were much, much harder. Jake spent 2 days recovering from the combat trial. His ribs were badly bruised and he could barely move without pain. But Velnari medical technology was incredible. They gave him something that made the pain go away and helped him heal faster than any earth medicine could. Zarakai visited him every day. She brought him food from her homeworld and told him stories about her childhood. Sometimes they just sat together in comfortable silence. Jake realized that being with her felt natural, like they had known each other for years instead of days. "The next trial is tomorrow," she said on the evening before the strategy test. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified," Jake admitted. "I'm a pilot, not a fleet commander. I've never commanded more than a handful of ships." Zarakai took his hand. Her skin was warm and smooth. "You don't need to command like a Velnari. You need to command like a human. That's what makes you special." The second trial took place in a massive simulation center. Jake sat in a command chair surrounded by holographic displays. The simulation would put him in control of a small fleet facing an overwhelming enemy force. It was based on a famous Velnari battle from their history. Thousands of spectators watched from viewing galleries above. Zarakai sat in the front row, her hands clenched tight. Duke Kael'thor sat not far from her, a nasty smile on his face. He had done something to the simulation, Jake was sure of it. He had made it even harder somehow. The simulation began. Jake's fleet appeared on the displays. He had 20 small ships. The enemy had 200. According to the scenario, he was supposed to hold a strategic position for as long as possible before retreating with honor. But Jake had read about this battle. He knew how the Velnari had fought it. They had charged straight at the enemy, fighting with courage and honor until most of their ships were destroyed. It was considered a glorious defeat. Jake had no intention of losing, gloriously or otherwise. Instead of charging forward, he ordered his ships to scatter and hide behind asteroids and debris. The Velnari observers started muttering. This was not how a warrior fought. This was cowardly. The enemy fleet advanced looking for Jake's ships. When they got close to the asteroid field, Jake's ships suddenly attacked from hiding. They hit the enemy's supply ships first, then disappeared again before the enemy could respond. Duke Kael'thor stood up in the viewing gallery. "This is dishonorable. He is fighting like a coward." But Zarakai stood up too. "He is fighting to win. Is that not the point?" For the next hour, Jake led the enemy fleet on a chase through the asteroid field. He used every trick he knew from human military history. Ambushes, fake retreats, dividing the enemy forces. He sacrificed damaged ships to lure the enemy into traps. He used the asteroids themselves as weapons, blowing them up to catch enemy ships in the debris. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't honorable by Velnari standards. But slowly, surely, Jake's fleet was winning. The audience watched in stunned silence. They had never seen anything like this before. The Velnari always fought face to face with courage and strength. This human was fighting with trickery and cunning. It went against everything they believed about warfare. Finally, after destroying half the enemy fleet, Jake led the remaining enemy ships into a perfect trap. He had been herding them slowly toward a cluster of unstable asteroids. When they were in position, he detonated charges his ships had planted earlier. The asteroids exploded in a chain reaction that took out most of the remaining enemy vessels. The simulation ended. Jake had achieved a total victory. He had destroyed an enemy fleet 10 times his size without losing a single ship. The viewing gallery erupted in chaos. Half the audience was cheering. The other half was shouting in anger. Duke Kael'thor was furious. "This is not acceptable," he roared. The human used dishonorable tactics. He should be disqualified. The trial judges gathered to discuss. They argued for almost an hour. Finally, they called Jake forward. "Human Jake Mitchell," the head judge said. "Your tactics were unusual. Some would say dishonorable. What do you say to this?" Jake stood up straight. His voice was clear and strong. "I say that honor means different things to different people. To the Velnari, honor means facing your enemy directly and fighting with courage. I respect that. But to humans, honor means protecting those you care about and completing your mission. If I had fought your way, my ships would have been destroyed and my mission would have failed. Would that have been honorable?" He paused and looked around at all the alien faces watching him. "I was asked to prove my strategic mind. I did that. I used the resources I had in the best way I could. I adapted to the situation. Isn't that what strategy is about? Not just following old patterns, but finding new ways to solve problems?" The judges looked at each other. Then the head judge nodded slowly. "You are correct. Strategy is about achieving victory, not about following tradition blindly. We rule that you have passed the second trial." Half the audience cheered. The other half looked unhappy. But the decision was made. Zarakai rushed down from the viewing gallery and hugged Jake tightly. She didn't care that thousands of people were watching. She was proud of him and wanted everyone to know it. "You were amazing," she whispered in his ear. "I was scared the whole time," Jake admitted. "Being scared and doing it anyway, that is true courage." That evening they walked together in the gardens. Jake's victory had caused a huge debate across the galaxy. Some species were praising his creativity. Others were calling him a cheater. But everyone was talking about the human who had beaten an impossible simulation. "There is one trial left," Zarakai said. "The trial of spirit. It is the hardest of all." "Tell me about it," Jake said. Zarakai looked worried. "You will enter our sacred temple. Inside there are plants that release chemicals into the air. These chemicals make you see things that are not real. They force you to face your deepest fears and desires. For my people, this is difficult but survivable. But for humans, what? What happens to humans? We don't know. No human has ever been exposed to these chemicals. They might kill you." Jake stopped walking. "So the third trial might actually kill me?" "Yes," Zarakai said quietly. "I would not blame you if you wanted to stop now. You have already proven yourself twice. No one would think less of you." Jake thought about it. He could walk away now. Go back to Earth a hero. He had already done more than anyone expected. But when he looked at Zarakai, he knew he couldn't walk away. He loved her. Somewhere in the past 2 weeks, he had fallen completely in love with this alien princess. Her strength, her intelligence, the way she challenged him to be better, the way she looked at him like he was the most important person in the galaxy. "I'm not going to quit," he said. "I'm going to face the third trial." Zarakai's eyes filled with tears. Velnari rarely cried, but she couldn't help it. "You could die. Then I'll die trying," Jake said. "Because you're worth it." They kissed under the alien stars. It was the first time they had kissed, and it felt like the most natural thing in the universe. But neither of them knew that Duke Kael'thor was watching from the shadows. And he had a plan to make sure Jake would never survive the third trial. The Duke had bribed the temple keepers to increase the concentration of the chemicals in the air. Enough to kill a human instantly. He would make it look like an accident. The primitive human simply couldn't handle the sacred trial. No one would be able to prove otherwise. And then, with Jake dead, the Duke would finally have a chance to claim Zarakai for himself. The sacred temple stood on a hill outside the city. It was ancient, built thousands of years ago by the first Velnari. The walls were covered in glowing crystals that pulsed like a heartbeat. Strange plants grew everywhere, their leaves shimmering with colors that hurt to look at. Jake stood at the entrance wearing simple white robes. No weapons were allowed in the temple. No communication devices, no protection of any kind. He would face whatever was inside alone. Zarakai stood beside him. She had barely slept the night before. Her face was pale and drawn. "You don't have to do this," she said for the 100th time. "Yes, I do," Jake said. He tried to smile, but his hands were shaking. He was terrified, but he had made his choice. Commander Tyran approached them. The big warrior looked grim. "I have news," he said quietly. "Bad news. My soldiers found evidence that Duke Kael'thor bribed the temple keepers. They increased the concentration of the sacred plants. Much more than is safe." Zarakai went very still. "How much more?" Enough to kill a human instantly. Maybe enough to kill even one of us. Jake felt his stomach drop. He was walking into a death trap. We can cancel the trial, Zarakai said quickly. We can expose Kael'thor and demand a new trial with proper conditions. That will take weeks, Commander Tyrion said. And Kael'thor has many allies. By the time we prove what he did, he will have covered his tracks. Jake looked at the temple entrance. The doors were open, waiting for him. Behind him, thousands of spectators watched from a safe distance. They were expecting a show. I'm going in, Jake said. No. Zarakai grabbed his arm. I won't let you die for me. Jake turned to face her. He took her hands in his. I'm not doing this just for you anymore. I'm doing it because it's right. Because Kael'thor needs to be stopped. Because someone needs to stand up and show that humans don't back down from challenges no matter how scared we are. Before she could argue more, he kissed her. Then he turned and walked into the temple. The doors closed behind him with a heavy thud. Inside, the temple was beautiful and terrifying. Bioluminescent plants covered every surface, glowing in shades of blue and green and purple. The air was thick and sweet like honey mixed with something sharper. Jake could feel the chemicals entering his lungs with every breath. At first, nothing happened. He walked through rooms filled with strange statues and murals showing Velnari history. His footsteps echoed in the silence. Then the chemicals started to affect him. The walls began to breathe. The statues turned their heads to watch him. Colors became sounds and sounds became tastes. Jake's mind was bending, reality breaking apart into pieces that didn't fit together anymore. He saw his biggest fear appear in front of him. He was back on Earth, but everyone was laughing at him. He had failed the trials and brought shame to humanity. The whole galaxy was mocking them because of him. You're not good enough, the vision said in his own voice. You never were. You're just a nobody from a backwards planet. What made you think you could be with someone like Zarakai? Jake felt himself starting to believe it. The doubt crept into his mind like poison. But then he remembered something Zarakai had told him. The visions weren't real. They were just reflections of his own fears. You're not real, he said out loud. I am good enough. I've proven that. The vision dissolved. But immediately another one took its place. This time he saw Zarakai, but she was turning away from him. You were interesting for a while, the false Zarakai said. But you're too different. Too weak, too human. I made a mistake choosing you. This vision hurt worse than the first one. Jake's chest felt tight. Tears ran down his face. But he knew this wasn't real either. The real Zarakai would never say these things. Not real, he whispered. Not real. But the chemicals were getting stronger. His body started to shut down. His legs gave out and he fell to the floor. His heart was beating too fast and then too slow. He couldn't breathe properly. The Duke's sabotage was working. The chemicals were killing him. Outside the temple, Zarakai knew something was wrong. She could feel it in her bones. The trial should take an hour. Jake had been inside for less than 10 minutes. Something's wrong, she said to Commander Tyrion. He's in trouble. We cannot enter the temple during a trial. It is forbidden by sacred law. Zarakai looked at the temple doors. Then she looked at Commander Tyrion. I don't care about sacred law. I care about Jake. She started walking toward the temple. Temple guards moved to block her path. Princess, you cannot enter. It is forbidden. Get out of my way, Zarakai said. Her voice was cold as ice. The guards didn't move, so Zarakai moved them. She was a trained warrior and a princess. The guards didn't stand a chance. She knocked them aside and ran for the temple doors. More guards came. Commander Tyrion made a decision. He had sworn to protect the princess and follow the law. But he had also grown to respect Jake. And he knew that sometimes laws needed to be broken. Help the princess, he roared to his soldiers. They charged forward, helping Zarakai fight her way to the temple entrance. The crowd watching the trial erupted in chaos. This had never happened before. A princess was violating sacred law in front of thousands of witnesses. Duke Kael'thor stood up in the viewing area. Stop her. She cannot be allowed to enter. But no one could stop her. Zarakai burst through the temple doors and ran inside. The chemicals hit her immediately. But she was Velnari. She could resist them better than a human. She ran through the temple, following her instincts until she found Jake. He was lying on the floor, not moving. His lips were blue. He wasn't breathing. No! Zarakai dropped to her knees beside him. She checked for a pulse. It was there, but very weak. She knew what she had to do. Velnari blood contained antibodies to the temple chemicals. It was part of their evolution. If she gave Jake her blood, it might save him. She pulled out a small knife she kept hidden in her boot. She cut her palm and then cut Jake's. She pressed their hands together, letting her blood flow into his wound. In Velnari culture, this was the most intimate thing two people could do. Mixing blood created a bond that could never be broken. It meant they were connected forever. "Live," she whispered. "Please live. I need you." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Jake gasped and his eyes opened. He looked up at Zarakai. Even through the chemical haze, he could see her clearly. She was crying. "You saved me," he said. "Always," she said. "I will always save you." She helped him to his feet and they walked out of the temple together, hands still pressed together, blood mixing between them. When they emerged, the crowd was in complete chaos. What they had witnessed was unprecedented. A princess had broken sacred law to save her mate, and now they were blood bonded, which meant they were connected in a way that went beyond marriage. Duke Kael'thor was screaming. She must be punished. She violated sacred law. She should be stripped of her title. Jake, still weak but getting stronger every moment thanks to Zarakai's blood, stepped forward. "The only person who should be punished is you, Duke Kael'thor. You sabotaged the trial. You tried to murder me." The Duke's face went pale. "Lies! The human lies!" Commander Tyron stepped forward with 3 temple keepers. These keepers have confessed to accepting bribes from the Duke. They increased the chemicals to lethal levels on his orders. The crowd gasped. This was not just cheating, this was attempted murder. Jake looked at the Duke. In Velnari culture, serious accusations can only be settled one way. "I challenge you to single combat." Duke Kael'thor smiled nastily. The human had barely survived the temple. He was weak and wounded. "This would be easy." "I accept your challenge," the Duke said. "And when I kill you, the princess will finally be mine." The combat arena was prepared in less than an hour. News of the challenge had spread across the entire galaxy. Billions of beings were watching through broadcasts. The human who had survived impossible trials was going to fight a Velnari Duke who had tried to murder him. Jake stood in the center of the arena. He was still weak from the temple chemicals, but Zarakai's blood was working through his system, making him stronger. He could feel it like fire in his veins, giving him energy he shouldn't have. Duke Kael'thor entered from the opposite side. He was massive, even bigger than most Velnari. His armor gleamed in the arena lights. He carried a ceremonial sword that looked like it could cut through steel. Jake had the same type of sword. It felt heavy in his hands. The rules were simple. Fight until one person couldn't continue. The winner could choose to kill the loser or show mercy. Either way, the fight would settle everything. Zarakai watched from the royal box. Her hands gripped the railing so hard her knuckles turned white. Commander Tyron stood beside her. "He is tired and hurt," the commander said quietly. "The Duke is fresh and experienced. This will be difficult." "Jake has something the Duke doesn't have," Zarakai said. "What?" "He fights for love. The Duke only fights for pride." The signal horn sounded. The fight began. Duke Kael'thor charged like a bull. His first strike was powerful enough to shatter stone. Jake barely blocked it. The force of the impact sent shockwaves up his arms. The Duke attacked again and again, each strike harder than the last. Jake defended desperately, backing up around the arena. To the crowd, it looked like the human was losing badly. "Pathetic," the Duke shouted. "You think you can challenge me? You are nothing but an insect." He landed a hit on Jake's shoulder. Pain exploded through Jake's body. He stumbled and fell to one knee. The Duke raised his sword for a finishing blow. "Die, human." But Jake had been waiting for this moment. He had been studying the Duke's fighting style, looking for weaknesses. The Duke was powerful but predictable. He always followed the same patterns. As the sword came down, Jake rolled to the side. The Duke's blade hit nothing but dirt. Before the Duke could recover, Jake swept his legs out from under him. The huge alien crashed to the ground. The crowd gasped. Jake got to his feet. Now it was his turn to attack. He used everything he had learned. Velnari combat techniques from Zarakai, human fighting styles from his military training, speed instead of strength, strategy instead of power. He hit the Duke in places where the armor didn't protect. Behind the knee, under the arm, the back of the neck, the Duke roared in anger and pain. He wasn't used to fighting someone who didn't follow the rules of honorable combat. Jake fought dirty when he needed to. He threw dirt in the Duke's eyes. He used the sun's glare to blind him. He made the Duke chase him until the big alien was tired. The fight went on for 30 minutes. Both fighters were bleeding and exhausted, but Jake had the advantage now. The Duke was bigger and stronger, but Jake was smarter and faster. Finally, Jake saw his opening. The Duke made a clumsy strike, putting too much weight forward. Jake sidestepped and struck the Duke's sword hand. The blade went flying across the arena. Before the Duke could react, Jake had his own sword at the Duke's throat. The arena went silent. Duke Kael'thor knelt in the dirt, defeated. He looked up at Jake with hatred in his eyes. "Kill me," the Duke spat. "Finish it." Jake looked around the arena. Thousands of aliens were watching, waiting to see what the human would do. Velnari tradition said he should kill the Duke. The Duke had tried to murder him. He had cheated and lied. He deserved death. But Jake thought about Earth, about humanity, about what made humans different. He lowered his sword. "No," Jake said. "I won't kill you," the crowd gasped. The Duke looked confused. "On Earth we believe that true strength includes mercy. You tried to kill me and you deserve punishment, but that punishment should come from your own people's justice system, not from revenge." Jake looked around at all the watching aliens. "I came here to prove that humans are worthy of respect. But if I kill a defeated enemy, what does that prove? That we're just as violent as you think we are? No, I'll show you something better. I'll show you that humans know when to fight and when to show compassion." He offered his hand to the Duke. For a long moment, the Duke just stared at it. Then slowly he took Jake's hand and stood up. "You shame me," the Duke said quietly. "I tried to kill you and you show me mercy. I have been a fool. You are more worthy than I ever was." He turned to face the crowd and spoke in a loud voice. "I, Duke Kael'thor, acknowledge my defeat and my crimes. I accept whatever punishment the Council decides. And I acknowledge that Jake Mitchell is worthy of Princess Zarakai, more worthy than I could ever be." The arena erupted in cheers. Not everyone was happy about it, but most of the crowd was impressed by what they had witnessed. The human had won, and then he had shown mercy. It was something new and different. Zarakai jumped down from the royal box and ran across the arena. She threw her arms around Jake and kissed him in front of everyone. The crowd cheered even louder. "You did it," she whispered. "You passed all 3 trials." "We did it," Jake corrected her. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." The bonding ceremony took place 3 days later. It was a mixture of human and Velnari traditions. Ambassador Crawford stood beside Jake as his representative. Commander Tiran stood beside Zarakai as hers. They exchanged vows in both English and the Velnari language. They gave each other gifts from their home worlds. Jake gave Zarakai a small piece of earth, a rock from the beach where he grew up. Zarakai gave Jake a crystal from her people's sacred mountain. When the ceremony was over, they were officially bonded, married in human terms, mated for life in Velnari terms. The political consequences were immediate. Earth and the Velnari Empire formed an alliance. Technology and knowledge began to flow both ways. Other alien species started treating humans with more respect. Humanity had proven they were not to be underestimated. A year later, Jake and Zarakai stood on a balcony overlooking Earth. They had spent the past year traveling between their 2 worlds, helping to build the alliance. It hadn't been easy. There were still people on both sides who didn't approve. But things were getting better. Zarakai placed Jake's hand on her belly. She was pregnant. The first human Velnari child ever conceived. "Are you scared?" Jake asked. "Terrified," Zarakai admitted. "No one knows what to expect. Our child will be unique in the entire galaxy." "That's okay," Jake said, pulling her close. "Being unique isn't bad. Look at us. We broke every rule and defied every expectation. And we made it work," Zarakai smiled. "When I first saw you, I knew you were special. I knew you were mine. But I never imagined how much you would change my life, change my entire world. I never imagined I would fall in love with an alien princess," Jake said. "But I'm glad I did. You make me want to be better, braver, stronger." They watched the sunset together. Behind them, the stars were beginning to appear. Somewhere up there, millions of worlds were watching to see what would happen next. The Human-Velnari alliance was changing the galaxy. Other species were forming new partnerships. Old enemies were becoming friends. Jake had been promoted to captain and now led a joint Human-Velnari peacekeeping force. Zarakai had become an ambassador for reform in her empire. arguing for change and progress while respecting tradition. Commander Tiran and Duke Kael'thor, surprisingly, had become allies. The Duke, humbled by his defeat, had dedicated himself to helping build the alliance he once opposed. "Do you ever think about that first day?" Zarakai asked, "when the weapon malfunctioned?" "All the time," Jake said. "If I hadn't run toward the danger, if you hadn't been standing there, if you hadn't chosen me, I would have found you anyway," Zarakai said with certainty. "Fate has a way of bringing together those who are meant to be together." Jake laughed. "Maybe. Or maybe we just got really lucky." "Maybe both," Zarakai said. As the last light faded from the sky, Jake thought about everything that had happened. A few months ago, he was just a pilot. Now he was married to a princess, helping to lead a galactic alliance and about to become a father to a child who would be a bridge between two worlds. It was crazy. It was impossible. It was wonderful. And it all started because an alien princess saw him, turned to her friends, and said those 5 words that changed everything. "That's my mate."